We begin at the foundation, the question of existence itself. Why is there something rather than nothing? Does the universe require an external cause, or can it exist on its own, without explanation? Theon, you speak first.
The universe is not necessary. It didn't have to exist. It could have been different or not existed at all. That's what we mean when we say the universe is contingent. And if it is contingent, then it cannot be the ultimate explanation for its own existence. Everything within the universe, stars, planets, even the laws of physics, depends on something else. But when we zoom out and ask about the universe as a whole, we face a crucial question. Could it be self-explaining? Could all of this, energy, time, consciousness, just exist with no foundation? The contingency argument says no. And this isn't a religious guess. It's a logical necessity. Let me explain. If anything exists, and clearly it does, then either it exists necessarily, it cannot not exist, or it exists contingently. Its existence depends on something else. The universe changes. It began, it is clearly not necessary. So there must be something outside of it that explains why it exists at all, something that exists necessarily, that depends on nothing else. This is what we call God. Not a bearded man in the clouds, but a necessary being, uncaused, eternal, immaterial, and the source of all other being. Even atheists like Bertrand Russell admitted they couldn't explain the universe's existence, he once said. The universe is just there, and that's all. But that's not an explanation, that's a shrug. Contingent things demand causes. The universe is full of them. But the chain of causes can't go on forever. Eventually there must be something that exists not because of anything else, but simply because it must. That is the ground of being. That is what I mean by God.
The contingency argument begins with an assumption that nothingness is more natural than something, and that existence needs permission. But that's not how modern physics sees it. We don't know that the universe is contingent. We don't know what nothing even is in a quantum framework. And we certainly don't know that there must be a being outside of time and space to explain it all. That's metaphysical storytelling, not evidence-based reasoning. The idea that everything needs a cause is rooted in our human experience. But causation, as we understand it, only applies within space and time, not outside of it. Once you reach the origin of space-time, the rules change. Time itself began at the Big Bang. So asking what caused it may be like asking what's north of the North Pole. Furthermore, positing a necessary being doesn't solve the problem, it just relocates it. If God exists necessarily, why can't the universe? Why assume that a mind must lie behind everything, rather than a brute physical reality? Science doesn't claim to have a final answer to the question of why there's something rather than nothing. But it does offer plausible, testable models. Quantum fluctuation fields, vacuum energy, spontaneous inflation. These are not gods of the gaps. They're attempts to understand reality on its own terms. The moment we say, God did it, we stop asking questions. I don't think the universe needs a cause. I think it just exists. And the burden of proof lies with those claiming it was created by a mind.
You're right about one thing. Science doesn't offer a final answer. But that's precisely why this isn't a scientific question. It's a metaphysical one. The moment you ask, why is there something rather than nothing, you've left the empirical and entered the philosophical. And there we need logical coherence, not lab results. Let's talk about this idea of a brute fact. If the universe simply exists with no reason, then we must accept the most foundational level of reality as radically unintelligible. We have no reason to expect consistency, laws, or order, yet we find all of those things in abundance. You reject the idea of a necessary being, but you're still left needing a necessary something. And a quantum vacuum isn't nothing. It's a field governed by rules, fluctuations, and time. It's part of the very reality that needs explaining. As for the question, why can't the universe be necessary? Because it changes. It is finite. It contains entropy. It has structure. And it began. The most well-supported scientific model, the Big Bang, implies that space-time itself had an origin. Anything that begins cannot be necessary. So no, appealing to quantum physics doesn't save you. It simply pushes the problem back a step. At some point, something must exist by its own nature, not caused, not conditioned, not temporary. That's the only way to avoid an infinite regress of explanations. And the best candidate for that is God.
And yet your God explanation leaves us with just as many problems. You say the universe needs a reason to exist, but then you exempt God from that same rule. That's special pleading. You're arbitrarily stopping the chain of causes at the point that fits your worldview. You also assume that change implies contingency. But what if the universe as a whole is the necessary framework within which change occurs? What if time, energy, and space are simply the default state? When you argue that science implies a beginning, you overstate the case. Yes, the Big Bang marks the expansion of our observable universe, but whether it was the absolute beginning is unknown. There are models, like eternal inflation or quantum gravity theories, where time emerges from a deeper, timeless reality, and none of them require a mind behind them. You speak of intelligibility and order as evidence for design. But order is exactly what we should expect in a universe where disorder would not allow observers to exist. That's the anthropic principle. We're here because this universe permits beings like us to evolve and ask these questions. That doesn't prove it was made for us. In the end, you say theism gives us answers, but it really gives us a mystery dressed as an explanation. A timeless, spaceless, immaterial mind? That's not simpler, that's not clearer, that's not necessary. The universe is strange, but strangeness does not imply a deity. It implies humility and caution before inserting a god into the gaps of our ignorance.
If you want to see the full debate, including every topic from fine-tuning to morality, consciousness, and more, tap the link on your screen now and watch the complete Does God Exist debate.